We have a terrific starting panel as we start a new week here. Philip Rucker, White House bureau chief for The Washington Post. Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for NPR. And Sam Stein, veteran political journalist, now politics editor for The Daily Beast and an MSNBC contributor. Good evening and welcome to you all. Phil, I'd like to read you a quote from some of your colleagues at The Washington Post. We'll call this byline the law firm of Parker, Dawsey, Lenig, and Costa. And we begin, quote, Trump is not consulting with top advisors, including Chief of Staff John F. Kelly and Chief White House lawyer Don McGahn, on his Russia legal choices or his comments about the probe, according to one person with knowledge of his actions, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe sensitive conversations. A lot of that going around. He is instead watching television and calling friends, this person said. The president continues to complain that his lawyers are not protecting him and that Deputy Attorney General Rod J. Rosenstein, who is supervising the probe, is up to mischief, said the person who spoke to Trump in recent days. Philip, can you shed any light on what mischief Rosenstein is up to and help us fill in the blanks here?
Well, Brian, I think what's happening here is twofold. First of all, the White House staff, the people working in the government, John Kelly, Don McGahn, and others, frankly, would rather not be a part of these Russia discussions. They don't want to have anything to do with the president's legal strategy with regard to the Mueller probe. But the president feels increasingly emboldened to make his own decisions, to act as his own lawyer, his own counsel, his own strategist, his own PR specialist, if it were. He feels comfortable in his job. He wants to call his shots, and he wants to handle this Mueller probe as he sees fit, which is with these tweets that he had over the weekend. He's been, I know from my reporting that he's been spending a lot of time talking about it on the phone with his friends, less so with his political advisors in the White House, but more so with the people that he communicates with, old pals from New York, even some of the hosts over at Fox News Channel, and watches a lot of TV commentary about all of this. And he's been using that phrase witch hunt a lot. And I would just make a historical parallel. Brian, a colleague of mine dug up an old clip in the Washington Post under the bylines Woodward and Bernstein, who you'll remember from the Watergate period. And that's exactly what Richard Nixon was doing in the White House as the Watergate hearings were underway. He was fuming to his friends and his advisors that this is a witch hunt out to get him. And you read that story, it's just eerily similar to what we have playing out today.
It certainly is. Tamara, isn't it striking to know that the Mueller and Trump forces meet at some point late in the week, last week? Let's presume Trump's lawyers go back to the White House and break it to the boss that this is not going to be over last Thanksgiving or New Year's. And then we see the president go to social media. Then we see the president hire the very familiar Joe DeGenova from Fox News.
Yeah, I think it had become increasingly clear that the timeline was slipping when it slipped from Thanksgiving to New Year's to, well, it's late March now at this point. And President Trump is bringing on this new lawyer who, based on all of his public comments, is very much in line with what President Trump sees of this investigation, which is this idea of it as a witch hunt. And President Trump, as we've well documented, he really likes people who he sees on TV defending him, and often tries to find ways to bring them into his circle. Interestingly, DeGenova, he's definitely going to be on the part of the outside team, not part of the inside team. When I asked White House lawyer Ty Cobb about this, he made it abundantly clear that DeGenova was not going to be part of his team. Cobb has been this lawyer who's been more about trying to cooperate with Mueller's investigation in hopes that the cooperation will speed things up, and not seeing the benefit in pushing back on it. Obviously, the president and some of his outside lawyers have a very different view of how this should be approached.
I'm told we're going to have some more reporting on that in about 60 seconds. Sam Stein, I want to show you an example of the president tweeting something this weekend and then an instant fact-checking of him that was kind of breathtaking to read. First, from the president's Twitter feed. Why does the Mueller team have 13 hardened Democrats, some big crooked Hillary supporters, and 0 Republicans? Again, you got to admire the capitalization. Another Dem recently added, does anyone think this is fair? And yet there is no collusion. But here came the almost real-time fact-checking from Glenn Kessler of the Washington Post. The way Trump tweets about how investigators can't be trusted because they donated to Democrats, it's easy to forget he donated to Hillary Clinton in 2002, 2003, 2005, 6, 7, and 9. Melania, Ivanka, and Don Jr. also made donations to Clinton. Facts are stubborn things, Sam.
Yeah, and sometimes it's helpful to step back and just remind ourselves how loose this president is with the truth. He takes to social media and things happen at such a rapid pace that we sometimes forget to notice the clear errors among the tweets. I will say this, I don't think this weekend was a particularly great sign for the president and his legal team in terms of the strategy that they're bringing to the Mueller probe. The idea that, well, first of all, let's step back and just recognize what is sort of a well-established truth in this city, which is he already has two lawyers who most people regard as a little bit long in the tooth, a little bit unable to keep up with the Mueller team, a little bit in over their heads. Now, that being said, if the reports are true tonight and bringing in this new lawyer is angering the current legal team and potentially compelling John Dowd to even quit or Ty Cobb to resign, that would be a huge setback. You'd essentially be starting at ground zero again. And I think, Trump's outbursts aside, they are having tangible impacts on the legal case that they're trying to bring against Mueller. But the bigger story, and I would just close on this, is not exactly what's happening in the White House. I would argue that it's what's happening on Capitol Hill. Because after the tantrum of this week on social media, there was a spotlight on congressional Republican leadership to see if they would do anything, whether it was in their public reactions or maybe a legislative response, to inoculate Bob Mueller. And what we heard today, absent that Trey Gowdy clip you played from Sunday, is basically crickets. Still, there is disbelief on Capitol Hill that he would actually take the step to fire Mueller. And so we have no legislative attempt to inoculate him from the firing.
So, Tamara, as you were speaking, you made our printer go off, which I've never seen done before. But as you were making the point that had been discussed throughout the day, and that is how un-Ty Cobbian a guy Joe DeGenova is. Our friends over at the New York Times, Michael Schmidt and Maggie Haberman, are on the board. I'll read just the first three graphs because this was just handed to me. President Trump's legal team was poised for a shakeup on Monday, according to two people briefed on the matter. As he openly discussed firing one of his lawyers, another considered resigning, and a third, who pushed theories on television that Mr. Trump was framed by the FBI, joined the roster. Mr. Trump has weighed aloud in recent days to close associates whether to dismiss his lawyer, Ty Cobb, who had pushed most strongly a strategy of cooperating fully with the special counsel investigation. Here's where it gets interesting. The president reassured Mr. Cobb that he had no plans to fire him, according to a person who spoke with the president late Monday, in part to prevent a narrative that his team was in disarray after the New York Times began making inquiries. Mr. Trump's lead lawyer, John Dowd, had contemplated leaving his post because he had concluded he has no control over the behavior of the president, the two people briefed on the matter said. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, Mr. Trump has reverted to a more aggressive strategy, and so on. So, Tamara, there you have it. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, as someone who has covered this White House, this is a familiar narrative applied not just to the legal team, but also to various White House aides. It's why you've had such an incredible level of turnover, both in the president's cabinet and in his top aides in the White House, like off the charts, historically unprecedented amounts of turnover. President Trump has not settled on the team that he likes. And this is not the first shakeup of his legal team. And we should say we don't know that this is a shakeup just yet. It might be just an addition. But certainly, there was a shakeup not too long ago that put Dowd in charge of this team and brought in Jay Sekulow. So it is a cycle that repeats itself with some frequency.
So, Philip, the question becomes, who remains to be able to say, Mr. President, it's one thing to want the people around you that you want. If there is something about making a hire that gives you the great feeling of a warm bath, that's fine. But please remember that hire may not help to achieve your goal.
Well, it's a good question, Brian. I think President Trump is making a lot of his own decisions at this point. Ty Cobb is a lawyer at the White House who's effectively doing a lot of the paperwork. He's literally responding to document requests at the White House, arranging interviews for White House staff. John Dowd is the one dealing with the president personally in his personal approach. But again, I think President Trump is making a lot of these decisions. He's deciding when to issue these tweets. He's deciding to attack Bob Mueller personally by name, as he did over this weekend. He's deciding to call it a witch hunt, and he's deciding that he wants to sit down for an interview, even though his lawyers are very concerned about that, and understandably so, because he has a history of exaggerating the facts and sometimes outright lying. And so there's a real genuine concern about whether he can truthfully answer questions face-to-face with the special counsel investigators.
Sam, I'm reminded over the weekend of what John Brennan said on social media. Friday night here, we were talking about the words of Barry McCaffrey, and now John Brennan on the board with this. It's a Sorkin-esque statement. When the full extent of your venality, moral turpitude, and political corruption becomes known, you will take your rightful place as a disgraced demagogue in the dustbin of history. You may scapegoat Andy McCabe, but you will not destroy America. America will triumph over you, said the former CIA director, whose job included but was not limited to going to his counterpart in Russia, saying, knock it off, something not done in the spy trade very often.
No, I like the use of Sorkin-esque there. You could see it in a West Wing episode for sure. I will say, John Brennan got a lot of pushback online from conservatives over that, in part because it was hyperbolic, but maybe that's what the times call for. The firing of Andrew McCabe is a really interesting case study in what this president has done vis-a-vis the entirety of the Mueller probe. Now, McCabe, you could look at it two ways. One is he may have been fired for cause, in this case, a lack of candor, and he went through a process within the DOJ that did require civil servants, not political hacks, to make a judgment on the case. But because Trump had weighed in so heavily and aggressively on this matter, because he had essentially called for his firing, and because he tooted his own horn, so to speak, after the firing was done, it created an aura around this, a bad stench of sorts about the whole firing. And we have to wonder, why did he do it in the first place? What was the point 2 days before McCabe was supposed to get his pension? And the only logical conclusion one could get is that he was trying to spoil a potential witness against him. He was trying to gaslight the process. And so this is what John Brennan was responding to, not necessarily the treatment of one man in the FBI, but the gaslighting of the American institution, Americans' trust in their institutions. And I think, we'll end up finding out at some point in time whether John Brennan's right or Donald Trump is.
We have only been on the air for 18 minutes, yet another eventful night on this shift. With our thanks to Phil Rucker, to Tamara Keith, and Sam Stein for starting us off as we begin a new week.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.